Good afternoon, dear viewers of DMR TV, and welcome to the program Discovering the Canon Law. I'm your host, Father Eric Afonga. In the program today, Discovering the Code of Canon Law, we shall begin with an introduction, that is, the Church and the Law, an introduction to the Code of Canon Law. But before we begin, let us break down some key things in the course of our discussions which shall be found and will be used. First, we talk about the Code of Canon Law. And there is a key word there, law. And for us to understand law, I take us back to our society in our day-to-day events. This afternoon, while walking out, having a stroll down, I met some people. And in the course of our discussion, one of them asked me, "Father, every society have rules and regulation, but the church is about the Bible and living out the gospel message. So, why is it that in the church there is law?" Not too far from that friend of mine, I met another person. And the person asked me, "Father, in our own churches, we have just one book which governs our day-to-day life, and that is the Bible. But why is it that you Catholics, apart from the Word of God, you still have a set of rules which we call the Code of Canon Law? And for others, they just know that in the church, there are many rules or there are laws that govern the day-to-day life of each and every Christian and the church as a whole." So from these two guys and their worries, a big question comes to mind. Why do we need laws in the church if we have the Bible? And still, what is the place of the law in a society like the church? And that is why we are here today, dear friends, to look at the church and the law. Why do we need law in the church? And this serves as an introduction to the book which we shall be studying in the course of this program and trying to clarify ourselves on the various terminologies and its application in our day-to-day lives. That is the Code of Canon Law. So in the first place, Thomas Aquinas defines law as a set of ordinances governed by practical reasons, ordered for the common good of society, and promulgated by a competent authority who has the powers to do so. Now, from this definition of Thomas Aquinas, we see that there are so many things involved here. First, it talks about an ordinance. Now, it's not just a counsel, it's not just an advice, but it's an ordinance, which means it has that obligatory capacity, that obligatory power, which means it is binding. It is binding on each and every one of us. And not just this, it also says it has to deal with practical reason. So which means this binding law or this ordinance has to come from practical reason. Reason being a key factor. So which means it is not just something which we sit and arbitrary, we just feel impressed and let's decide on something. Let's just create a law. Let's just do something. No. It has to flow from reason. And not just reason, but practical reason. Why practical reason? Because every law has as its focus helping in the ordering of society. And not just in the ordering of society, but helping in ordering the day-to-day lives of each and every member of that given society. So our interactions in that society, the way we live, the way we operate with each other, that which governs that interaction is the law. And it has to be practical, which means it has to be realistic, keeping in mind these factors, that it is not just something in the air, but it is something which affects and directs and also influences the lives of each and every member of the community. That is about practical reason. And he says this is ordered towards the common good. So which means every law, when it is being promulgated, it is not just written or said, but it has to be officially published, that is promulgated. So when this law or the laws are promulgated, it will imply that by virtue of this promulgation, it has one focus. And what is that? The common good. Which means it's not just all about what I think, what I feel, or what everyone should feel or are moved at that moment. No, it will have to do with the common good, which means it encompasses everyone. So there is a broader picture, there is a larger context, and that larger context has to do with the good of everyone. For example, let's say we are in a school and we pop up and we see that students just go out as a wish. They don't take instructions from the teachers. The staff could decide and come up with a set of laws to help direct the students, so that in order for them to live as students, these laws will help them set a boundary, set a limit, not just to their freedom, but also to guide them in the use of that freedom, so that there is order in the society or in that school. So you discover that the law there is not just about one individual, but the law now is all about the good of the school, taking into consideration both the students and the staff. The same thing, at the level of a diocese, the bishop could look at a situation, study it, and in coming out with a particular law, he has the greater good of the diocese. For example, when priests were being asked to put on the clerical wear, the Roman collar shirt, or the soutane or the cassocks for priests, that is during the mornings right up to 6 p.m. by the bishop, about a year or two ago, that was all about the good of the priests and the seminarians. Why? It doesn't just help to identify them, but it also helps for people to know who they are and to indicate to the world that these are men called to serve the church. And it will save the priests and the seminarians for many other things which not putting on that clerical wear may have endangered them too. Sometimes people may be doing some checks and seeing you with that, you are kind of exempted. Thanks to that, you followed the law and you put it on. Rather than that, you are caught, locked up, and then in the time of questioning, you say, I'm a priest. And they are asking, how do we identify you? So you see, the law there is not just about one or two cases, but it's about the greater good of the clerics in question. And that is why the bishop pushed forward this law and put a stamp and promulgated it, and it was published. And his diocesan signature is there with a seal. Now, dear friends, that is about the law as defined by Thomas Aquinas, and we just break down the definition from Thomas Aquinas. But let's ask ourselves, from this definition, what is really law? We look at the word law, we see that it comes from the Latin word ius. And ius could mean right. And not just right, it could also mean privilege. As well as it could also mean several things. And from this use, we have another Latin word which substitutes for law. That is lex, which means law. And from lex, we have the word legis, which builds upon and gives us legislative, which is an English word indicative of that which is responsible for promulgating laws and also for helping in the keeping of that law. And also we have another word apart from use and apart from lex, which assist us in defining the word law. And that is another word called nomos from the Greek. And nomos will simply mean law. So we discover that from these various definitions, we can now ask ourselves, why do we say the code of canon law? From there, let's look at the various words involved. Since we have seen law, now, what do we mean code? Code will simply mean a collection of something which assists in governance. For example, if you are going somewhere and they say, give me the code. Now, the code could be a number. It could be a fingerprint. It could be something that grants you access to where or what you are seeking for. Now, from this word code, we see that when it is used together with the other word canon law, it simply means a guide or a key into the laws that governs us as Catholics. And that is why the very next word canon, from the Greek canon, will mean a ruler, a bar, or a mark. A ruler in terms of measurement, a bar in terms of standard, and a rule in terms of order. So from this we see that in our context, it will mean the rules that governs the day-to-day life of the church. And that is why in the Apostolic Constitution, released in 1983 by Pope John Paul II of blessed memory, we are made to understand that the purpose for the Code of Canon Law, as it is set in Sacred Disciplinae Leges, that it is all about assisting us Christians to be able to order our lives so much so that we can manifest proper Christian charity. Love can be reciprocated among ourselves, and our various charisms and gifts can be used for the proper development of the church and the enriching of each and every faithful of the church. And so, when we look at the various words and how we have broken them down, we see that when we look at Code of Canon Law, in summary, we could tell ourselves this code which we are talking about is the set of rules that governs or orders our lives as members of the church, which the church is a community. So as members of the church, which is a community of the Christian faithful, the rules and regulation that governs our life are what are found in the Code of Canon Law. We understand that there are other rules which are not found, or laws which are not found in the code, which are applicational and concern several things in the life, about the life of the church. But here we are being made to understand that here we have that which forms the background, the bedrock upon which every other law or every other rule in the church stems from or develops itself from. And if we understand this, then we now understand why in the church we have law, which will indicate that it will shift us from the negative perspective of what the law is and why it is found in the church, to see it more from a Christian angle, that it is all about ordering our lives and helping us live out the gospel practically. So we take a break, and after a musical interlude, we continue with the next point in our presentation.
I hear you call. Your spirit burns deep within me. Fire my life with your love.
Thank you so much, Madam Kindness, for that musical interlude. So touching, so searching a song. So like we're saying before our musical interlude, we're looking on law. What is law? And not just that, we saw what is the code of canon law. And we break down the various words used, code, canon, and law. Now, as a kind of summary of what the code of canon law is all about in terms of structure, since we have spoken about the code, let's look at the structure of the code. The code is divided into 7 books, and these 7 books build up having 1,752 canons. And the very first canon prescribes to us who these laws are for. And it says it is for those of the Latin Rite, that is, those of the Roman Catholic Church which fall under the Roman Rite. As we continue the program, we shall see why we say those who are concerned with the Latin Rite and not just any other rite. And the very last canon, canon 1752, which is the last canon, tells us that the highest law or the supreme law is the salvation of souls, what we call in Latin lex suprema. And from this we see that from my 2 friends who asked me about why is it that we have the Bible, but we Catholics are still having laws instead of using what the Bible is as prescribed for us. And so, dear friends, we see that with the salvation of souls being the supreme law, it boils down to the fact that all these rules are all about ordering us, ordering our lives towards this salvation, which St. Paul in his letter to the Philippians, chapter 2, the verses 13 and 14 would prescribe that let us work for this salvation with fear and trembling. So, dear friends, we look at the structure very briefly on the code of canon law. Like I said, it is made up of 7 books, and we look at each of the books in a kind of a summary manner. So book 1 talks about general norms. I will talk about general norms. It talks about those norms which act as the pillar governing our various governing the other laws in the church in the various aspects of the church's life. And so it's like the base, the foundation upon which every other laws in the other books build upon. And when we go to book 2, it's about the people of God. And with the people of God, we see the different categories of the people of God in the church. With time, we shall get down to those various categories of people in the church. And in book 3, we have the teaching office of the church. That is how the church, as the mother who teaches, goes about her teaching. And in book 4, we have the sanctifying office of the church. Like I said, the greatest law is all about the salvation of souls. And here we see how souls are sanctified in order for them to be saved. And there we have sacraments, sacred places, and sacred times. In book 5, we have the temporal goods of the church. And here it talks about how the various properties of the church, both movable and immovable assets, are managed and controlled by those placed upon them as having charge over them. And in book 6, we have sanctions. In every society, there is order. And the law is there to bring that order. But when disorder props up, how do we do to sort it out? And that is where now we have sanctions. And in book 7, the last but not the least, we have processes. But mind you, dear friends, book 6 was recently revised by the late Pontiff Pope Francis. And so we have now quite a good number of modifications on the various canons found in book 6. And in book 7, where we have processes, remember in book 6 is all about curbing in disorder, which means sanctions has to be given. But now book 7 handles how these sanctions are to be given, which means the processes that are to be followed in order for a sanction to be meted out on an individual or the particular juridic person involved in that act. So dear friends, as we wrap up today's presentation, we have seen what is law. We have broken down the word code of canon law and seen what a code is, what is canon and what is law. And cumulatively we saw what is the code of canon law. And we have seen why in our church we have laws that bind us together. And also we have seen the structure of the code of canon law. When we meet next time, we shall look at the function and the purpose of law in the church. And from there, we shall pick up some other things as we continue to journey with you through the code of the canon law to savour the riches that are found in this jewel, this wonderful book of the church. So I've been your host, Father Eric Afongang, and behind the 1001 buttons, we have had Madam Kindness, who have made sure that we go live and we can be seen. And for you, my dear viewers, we wish ourselves a wonderful evening and keep watching programs over DMRO TV. DMRO TV, sharing the light of faith and hope.